preach?
No more than 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. For those of you who don't know me, that is not going to be an issue. We'll be done fairly quick. Oddly enough, on the subject of time limits, what I'm going to talk about today, the title of the sermon is Endurance Running. Here recently, I decided that I'm not in exactly what you would call good shape. Not necessarily in bad shape, but not in good shape. So I decided I was going to start running. I found this program, they call it Couch to 5K. Yes.
How's that going for you?
I'll get to that. Couch to 5K, it's a gradual running program. It's designed to get you from not running at all to running either 5 kilometers, 3 miles, or 30 minutes in a stretch. It's kind of the way it goes. So, I start this off. I downloaded a nice little podcast that tells you when to run, when to walk, and it goes on in these series. It's set to music. It's really pretty nice. Makes for an easy time. So, I start off. And this is actually the second time I've started this, by the way. I didn't quite continue on the first time. So I start off and I'm going along. And about midway through, I'm thinking, I'm almost done. I've got to be almost done. And the voice comes on and says, you're halfway there. Well, that's not good. So I continue on, and I'm done. I'm dying. I cannot walk. My run has slowed down to a walk. My walk is barely there. And the voice comes on and says, you should be feeling the effects of your run, but not feel tired or out of breath. In the meantime, I'm lying on the grass in some stranger's yard, breathing heavily. I don't have that much endurance yet. Endurance comes through practice, through training. You don't start out being able to run a marathon. You run a mile here, a mile there, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, and eventually you get to the point where you can make that full-on marathon. Faith is very much the same. Faith doesn't start out as easy. In fact, it never becomes easy. But it becomes easier as we go along, as we train ourselves in that faith. The scripture today is in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Starts off, it says, now the author of Hebrews, we don't really know who he is. Some people say it was Paul, some people say it was Peter. We're not sure who the author of Hebrews was, but what we do know is that the author was heavily concerned with faith. He talks about it a lot. Talks about the importance of faith, the difficulties of faith, how to build your faith, how badly you need faith. He talks about not having faith. In chapter 11, it's probably one of the most famous chapters in the Bible. It's what they call the Hall of Faith. It's all of these men and women in the Bible that did amazing things by faith. Coming out of that, the author writes, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary or lose heart. Hebrews, again in the beginning of chapter 11, Hebrews defines faith as the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old gained approval. For by faith the men of the Old Testament gained the approval of God. For by faith they did these great things. For by faith Moses led the people out of Egypt. For by faith Noah built a boat even though nobody had ever heard of a boat before. There had never been rain. By faith, all 5.5 foot maybe of David walked out to a 9-foot giant and said, "Bring it on." By faith, they did these things. They exercised their faith. 2 points that I want to talk about today. The first is that we follow in their footsteps. We follow in the footsteps of these great men of faith, of David, of Noah, of Moses, of Solomon, of Jesus. We follow in their footsteps. The second, I want to talk about how we build this endurance, how we our running form, as it would, if you will. First thing, the following in the footsteps of those before us. It talks about, in verse 1, it says, "Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us." The witnesses here doesn't necessarily mean that they're watching us. In Ecclesiastes, it says, "The dead do not know anything that happens on the earth." In Luke, we see that they may have memories of it, but they're not really up to date. It's not like they're watching you. So instead, so if it doesn't mean that they're watching you, what does it mean? It means that they've gone before, that they have borne witness to the power of faith. They are the witnesses for that power. Not necessarily that they are watching us, but they serve as our example, as our benchmark, if you will. They serve as an example that faith is not easy. If you look at the last, at verse 39 of chapter 11, it says, "And all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised." They had faith in something. They had faith that God would deliver them, that God would send His Messiah, His Savior. But not a one of them ever actually saw Him. Never saw Jesus. David went to his grave having never physically seen the Christ, the Messiah. But he still had faith in Him. And by that faith, he was counted as righteous. If they were able to have faith in something they had not seen, we've seen Him. We have seen Jesus. We have His words, we have what He's left for us. If you're a believer, you have had an encounter with Him. How much easier should it be for us? And yet so often it isn't. It's not easy for us because a lot of times we don't really know what we're doing. We don't know how to exercise that faith. We call it blind faith, but in reality, it takes work. It takes effort. The author of Hebrews shows us how it ought to be done. Starting in the second half of verse 1, it says, "Let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin that so easily entangles us." One of the things about running is you have to have the right equipment, the right clothing. What I want you to do in order to test this is to go out and run as far as you can in your church clothes. Anybody want to take me up on that? No. You don't see a marathon runner running along in jeans and or a suit or whatever. You see he has on these shorts that are barely there, sleeveless shirt. He wants to be able to move freely. It's the same for us. If we were to go out in our church clothes and try to run a marathon, we would get tangled up. It would not be as easy. We have to be able to move freely in our faith. And in order to do so, we have to lay aside all these sins that entangle us, any unbelief that we struggle with, any habits that are not good for us, the relationships that we have in our lives that we know aren't necessarily the best thing for us. But we don't ever want to give them up. What do we think? We think, I can change that person. It is easier for an unbeliever to change you than it is for you to change an unbeliever. Does that mean you should completely cut off all contact? No. But you have to exercise that faith. You have to be strong. Know where your limits are. Nobody starts out running a marathon. I'm very well aware of my running limits. My running limits right now is about 30 minutes well, I say that, 15 minutes, I think is what I actually ran. Other than that, I'm done. As I train, as I work on it, that will continue to get better and better and better until one day, apparently, according to this program, I'm going to be running 30 minutes in a stretch. I'll let you know whenever that happens. In order to exercise that faith, we have to lay down everything that weighs us down. Second thing that we must have whenever we're running this race of faith is that endurance. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Endurance was something that was taught by Jesus. Matthew 10:22 and 24:13 both mention that he who endures will receive a crown, will be blessed. Endurance is something that, again, has to be taught. You don't just have it. You don't become a believer and instantly you're fine. You know, you're not. That's not how it works. Instead, endurance comes through testing our faith. James 1:2 says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance." Trials is what produce endurance. Tests are never fun. Never. Agreed? You seem to be nodding your head. They're never fun. But imagine how much tougher it would be if you get to the final, you get to the end of the semester, you get to the end of the year, and all of a sudden you have to completely go back and go over everything you've ever learned, having never been tested over any of it. The way tests are designed to work is they're designed to build upon each other. You know, one test, you get the first test of the year, and it's not that difficult. It's, mainly review over what you learned the year before. That second test is a little bit tougher. That third test, that midterm or whatever, a little bit harder than that, all the way up until you hit the final. The final is supposed to be the toughest, but by that point, you're so used to it. You're acclimated to taking that test that it becomes almost second nature to you. Faith should be the same way. As we're tested, the testing gets tougher. Each test my faith comes up against is a little bit harder than the one before that. Because if I kept working on the same test, then my faith wouldn't grow. I overcome one obstacle and am faced with another one. But because I've overcome that first, I'm better prepared. That's how faith works. That's how perseverance works. James goes on to say, let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Perfect and complete. Without endurance, you're not complete. Without that perseverance, you're not complete. The third thing that we need to understand whenever we're running this race is where our focus ought to be. The Olympics are coming up a few months. I like the track and field stuff. I like watching them. One thing you never see though, 100-yard dash, 200-yard meter dash, 200 meters, 400, 800, any length of race, you never see any runner looking around. They don't really care where the other people are because they know their own game plan. They know what they're doing. They know where their focus ought to be. Their focus is directly ahead at where they're going. Whenever I was running the other night, or each of the previous 3 nights, I would notice that as I started out, I was looking ahead. I was good. I was feeling all right. I had a little bounce in my step. I was good until as I went further along, that bounce went away, and then my eyes started to drop. And by the end, I'm just staring at the ground, wondering when is this going to end. I'd lost my focus. My focus was no longer on where I was going, but trying not to trip, worried about what was around me. We can gaze at the people around us, at these witnesses that Hebrews talks about. These are good things to do, to look at them, to take a glance at them, to see what they did and to show us what we can do. But our focus needs to be on Christ. Verse 2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, knowing where we're going. Why do we fix our eyes on Jesus? What sets him apart? Well, first off, he's Christ, Messiah. We follow him. But more than that, he's won the race. The race is already done. I love the description. Satan is a fighter fighting a fight he's already lost. He can't possibly win because Jesus has already finished it. How did he do so? It says, for the joy set before him. For the joy that was set before him. He did so by fixing his eyes on God. Every time some test would come up against him, what would Jesus do? Go to Scripture. Go to his Father. Satan comes up against him and says, turn the stone into bread. Throw yourself off of the temple and have the angels catch you. It says, worship me, and I will give you everything. Each time, Jesus has his eyes focused on God. He comes back at him with Scripture. We should be the same way. We should have this in our hearts, ready to give an answer every time something comes up against us. Me personally, that's what I want my faith to be. That I have an answer for whatever comes up against me. For whatever belief system that tries to tell me that I'm wrong. For whatever person tries to tell me that there is no God, or that we can't know him. I want to have an answer for that. That's my personal faith, the way I want my faith to work. Christ endured all things, and he did not lose heart. By focusing on him, we can do the same. It's been done. Christ was flesh and blood like us. That's part of what makes it so amazing. He was nothing spectacularly special in a human sense. Yes, he was God. But he was God squeezed into this. He did everything that we did. He hungered like we did. He bled like we did, like we do. He got tired like we do. But what he did not do is grow weary. What he did not do is quit. The same should go for us. So the question becomes, what kind of runners are we? I said that the Olympics are coming up. The last Olympics, this man came out of almost nowhere. His name was Usain Bolt. You remember? Fastest man in the world. 100-meter dash, world record holder, blazing fast. But there's a problem with that. He's fast over 100 meters, but he can't possibly keep that up. Bolt has no endurance. Here's another type of runner, or another runner. His name is, and I'm going to really butcher this, Haile Gebrselassie. Anybody ever heard of him? Okay. Haile Gebrselassie is an Ethiopian. Stands about 5'5"-ish. Weighs probably 100 pounds, maybe. But can run further than anybody could ever dream. The man holds 27 records, world records, at distances over 800 meters. He held the world marathon record for 3 years. The times on the marathon record progression is the current record, there's a second, then there's his. He's the third fastest time ever. His is also the oldest time on the list. That means there were at least 7 other people that ran slower than he did after he did. On this top 10 in the world, on the top 10 fastest times in the world. So what kind of runner are you? Are you a sprinter? Or are you a marathon? Whenever Jesus talked about the parable of the sower, the sprinter would be the one that bursts through, but there's not enough soil underneath him. There's not enough, he's not grounded. And he withers and he dies and he falls away. The marathoner falls on good ground. He soaks up that good soil. He's got a good foundation. You cannot destroy it. Do you have the endurance to finish the race that has been set before us? And if not, where do you need to work? Do you need to work on your vision? Do you need to work on your form? If you don't know, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then this probably makes no sense to you at all. I'm just up here talking about running because you haven't had that meeting, that face-to-face meeting with Christ. I encourage you to, as Mark plays here in a minute, go to God. Do whatever, have that conversation, have that talk with God. Figure out where you stand on that faith, on your endurance. Can you make it to the end? I want to be at a point where at the very end I'm told that I ran a good race, that I did not finish, that I did not fail. I don't want to stumble across the finish line, dehydrated, out of breath, completely spent. I want to finish well, upright, my eyes focused on Christ.